And again, just another overall shot of where I was at that point in time with the build. Okay, so the next problem I had to tackle was mounting the battery tray, the LiPo tray. And my original thought was I was just going to lay the LiPo tray across the chassis sideways, drill some holes in the chassis, and mount the thing to the chassis. Well, it never dawned on me that the LiPo tray is actually wider than the chassis. So the LiPo tray that I bought it has 6 countersunk holes inside of it, 2 on each end, 2 in the middle. I had nothing to mount the outside holes to, so obviously that wasn't going to work. And what I ended up coming up with to solve that problem was this, basically just this Lexan plate. It's 2 1/8 inch pieces of Lexan glued together, and I drilled. There's 2 different sets of drill holes in it. I'll get into what's what as far as the drill holes go in another slide. But this was basically my answer to how to mount the battery tray, which you'll see in more detail in a minute. Okay, so here is basically a rundown of what all these holes are, and I'll also explain kind of what happened with some of these holes. The holes that are circled in red are the holes that the battery tray mounts to. It mounts from the top down onto the plate. The screws that you screw down into the plate. The blue holes are the holes that mount the plate to the chassis. And basically what I did was I just used 5 existing holes on the bottom of the chassis, since they're countersunk on the bottom. And basically this piece mounts via the blue holes from the bottom of the chassis. So the screws come up through the bottom of the chassis, and then of course they're flush with the bottom of the chassis because they are countersunk, and they are basically the exact length they need to be in order not to come up. They basically come up right to the top of the plate and then stop. I believe, if I remember correctly, the 2 1/8 inch pieces together, I think I ended up using 8 millimeter. They were M3 by 8 millimeter screws, or maybe they were 6 millimeters. I can't remember now. If you happen to do this, you'll just have to kind of you have to buy a couple of 6s and a couple of 8s and just compare. I can't remember off the top of my head which one I did. Something's telling me it was 8s, 8 millimeter screws. At any rate, they basically came right up to the top. They might have poked out just a fraction of a millimeter, but not enough to interfere with the battery tray mounting. The 2 green holes in the middle were basically just test holes that I used 2 different size drill bits and basically was trying to determine the best size hole to use. So when I screwed the 3 millimeter screws down into it, that it would actually just kind of basically thread the hole. So it would you could screw and unscrew the plate. You could detach it basically and then screw it back into place. Those were just kind of test holes. I didn't have any other plastic to test on, or I didn't have any other Lexan, I should say, to test on, so that's what ended up happening. And I figured, what the heck, it's a prototype. You're not going to see it anyway. And eventually, if this tray ever breaks, I'll end up redoing it. And then, of course, I won't have those two holes there. But what ended up happening, I'm sure some of you are probably looking at the blue holes going, man, that's awfully close to the sides. What I ended up doing was basically I did not allow myself enough room for error. In order to save space, because I still had to mount the receiver and stuff like that, I basically was trying to make this thing a perfect size. What ended up happening was, after I glued the two pieces together, I realized that the two pieces that I cut out were not exactly the same size, even though I templated one from the other. For some reason they didn't come out exactly the same, so I ended up having to take a sanding drum to them to make everything flush on all four sides. And when I did, I basically shaved almost 1.5 millimeters total off the total width, which made the holes very close to the edges. So instead of redo the whole thing, I figured, I'll roll with it for now. If and when it ever breaks, I'll redo it, and I'll learn my lesson. I'll give myself a few extra millimeters to work with next time around, so that doesn't happen. And this is just a simple shot from the side showing the thickness. It was two 1/8 inch pieces of Lexan glued together. And here again is just another picture of the kit where I was at the time, with the plate mounted to the chassis. And this is just a picture of the thing mounted with the circles, so you can see the blue circles are the screws. Again, very close to the edges. One of them, the middle one on the right hand side there, isn't really doing much. It actually kind of came up the side. It's not solidly in there. The other four are solidly in there, even though the top right hand corner one is very close to the edge. It's still solid. Again, if I ever break it, I'll do a better job. I'll leave myself a little more room to work with next time. But that's just a general overview of it with it mounted. And then you'll notice all the, I don't know, it looks very nasty. That's actually just the super glue holding it together. For some reason it turned very white after it dried, so I kind of wasn't too happy about that. I guess technically, if I really wanted to, I could probably paint the Lexan or something like that to kind of cover it up, but really once the battery tray's on top of it, you don't see it anyway, so it's not a real big deal.